Did you know that more than 90% of viewers don't subscribe to our channel? If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We don't run ads on our videos, so we don't earn anything from them. Every subscription, every like, every comment truly means the world to us. Your support keeps our passion alive and motivates us to create more. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's start our story. Story number 1. For more than 20 years, Daniel made a living chasing the horizon. His truck was a faded blue Freightliner with a patched seat and a temperamental radio, the kind of rig that rattled a little but had never failed him. Daniel knew the interstate systems better than most people knew their own neighborhoods. He could name every decent diner, every steep grade, every stretch of road where the wind liked to shove a trailer sideways. His favorite route, oddly enough, was also the loneliest, a nighttime run across a high desert highway that cut through miles of scrub and low mesas. Out there, the stars felt close, bright enough to make the asphalt glow in silver outlines. He liked the quiet. No traffic, no sudden lane merges, no impatient cars darting around his truck. Just the steady thrum of the engine and the soft roar of tires on pavement. On a late autumn night, he was running that route again, an overnight haul with a refrigerated trailer humming faintly behind him. The clock on the dash read 1:43 a.m. The road was empty, sky clear, the desert air smooth and dry. His thermos sat half empty in the cup holder, the coffee inside already gone lukewarm. Daniel watched the white lines slide past under his headlights and thought about nothing in particular. That was the way he liked it. Long solo runs gave him room to let his mind drift. About 40 miles past the last town, he saw the first sign. Gas, food, lodging, exit 247, 2 miles. He frowned slightly. An exit this far out? He knew this stretch. There was usually nothing until a small truck stop closer to the state line. Maybe a new development had gone up. Highways changed. Construction came and went. It happened. He checked his fuel gauge. Plenty in the tank, but he had been wanting a bathroom break, and the coffee in his thermos had turned almost cold. A stop wouldn't hurt. 2 miles later, the reflective green numbers of exit 247 floated into view, the off-ramp curving away into the dark. He flicked on his turn signal, watched it tick-tock orange on the mirror, and eased the rig down the ramp. A short frontage road led to a low cluster of lights, a gas station with an older-style canopy, a tiny diner attached to it, and a small motel with a flickering vacancy sign. The buildings were washed in a pale, almost washed-out glow, like light leaking from an old television screen. The station canopy held 4 pumps. The sign above them read, Sundown Gas and Market. A single car, an older sedan, sat parked near the diner. No other trucks. No movement. Daniel pulled his rig up along the edge of the lot, careful not to block the pumps. He set his brake, the familiar hiss of air filling the cabin, and the truck settled with a soft creak. The chill desert night slipped in as he opened the driver's door. He climbed down, his boots thudding onto cracked asphalt. The air felt strangely still. No insects buzzed around the lights. No distant hum of highway. It was as if the world had been wrapped in a blanket. Inside the gas station, a small bell above the door chimed with a tinny, slightly delayed sound. The interior was cramped but clean. Shelves of snacks, a cooler filled with sodas, a rack of dusty maps by the door. At the far counter stood a man in a red vest with a faded name tag that simply read, Earl. Earl was older, maybe in his late 60s, with a thin mustache and a weathered face. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue. He looked up as Daniel entered, as if he had been waiting. "Evenin'," the man said. His voice carried a slight echo, like someone speaking into an empty room. "Road's quiet tonight." Daniel nodded, glancing around. "Sure is. Didn't even know this place was out here." The man smiled faintly. "Been here a long time. Folks just drive on by these days. You need fuel, or just a stretch and a snack? Bathroom and some hot coffee if you've got it. In the back, down the hall." The man gestured toward a narrow corridor. "Coffee's fresh by the counter. Help yourself." Daniel thanked him and walked toward the hallway. As he passed the coolers, he noticed the hum. It was louder than usual, a low droning sound that seemed to come from more than one direction at once, as if the coolers and the lights and the old soda machine were all vibrating at the same slow pitch. He shook it off. Long nights did that sometimes. Made ordinary sounds feel bigger. The restroom was spotless, almost unnaturally so. No graffiti, no scuffed tiles, no paper towel scraps. The mirror over the sink was perfectly clear. Daniel washed his hands, splashed water on his face, and stared at his reflection for a moment. His eyes looked more tired than he felt. When he stepped back out into the main area, Earl was still at the counter, standing in the exact same position, hands folded, as if he hadn't moved at all. Daniel poured himself a coffee from the glass pot on the burner. The liquid steamed, but not much. It smelled faintly like coffee, faintly like something else. He added cream and sugar, more out of habit than taste. "How far to the state line from here?" Daniel asked. 47 miles, Earl replied instantly. "Straight east, can't miss it." Daniel hesitated. On this route, the line was usually about 60 miles from that point, not 47. Maybe this exit cut the corner a bit. Roads could do that. As he paid for the coffee and a pack of gum, Earl's pale eyes held his for a second longer than felt natural. "Long road ahead," Earl said. "Best not to linger." Back in the truck, Daniel settled into his seat, the paper coffee cup warm in his hand. He glanced at the clock. 5 a.m. He had been stopped only a few minutes. He pulled out of the lot, glancing once at the lonely motel with its flickering sign. One of the upstairs curtains moved slightly, as if someone had been watching him. When he looked again, the curtain was motionless. The on-ramp rose gently and joined the highway. Daniel merged back into the right lane, the empty road unfolding again beneath his headlights. He took a sip of the coffee. It was weak, almost flavorless, but warm enough. The hum of travel returned, the familiar rhythm of passing reflector posts. He drove in silence, letting his mind wander. 10 minutes slipped by. Then 20. Then he saw the sign. Gas, food, lodging, exit 247, 2 miles. He blinked. His foot eased off the accelerator, truck gliding on momentum. That couldn't be right. He had just come from exit 247. There shouldn't be another stop that close, not out here. Maybe he had misread the number. As he drew nearer, his headlights washed over the green board. The numbers glowed clear and unmistakable. Exit 247, 2 miles. His fingers tightened on the wheel. The CB radio on the dash crackled faintly with static, though he hadn't touched it. He told himself it was a coincidence. Another exit with the same number. A misprint on the sign. Highways were full of little mistakes. 2 miles later, the ramp appeared, identical to the one before. Same curve, same angle, same reflectors. The frontage road beyond held a small cluster of lights. A gas station, a diner, a motel with a flickering vacancy sign. Daniel's mouth went dry. He slowed the truck, watching the scene draw nearer, details sliding into focus. The station canopy, the pumps, the faded sundown gas and market sign, the older sedan still parked by the diner. He did not take the exit. He kept his hands steady on the wheel and let the ramp pass by on his right, trying not to stare, resisting the urge to crane his neck and search for Earl's outline in the station window. The truck rolled on. The ramp fell away behind him. In his mirror, the cluster of lights shrank and disappeared into the night. The highway stretched forward, the same empty lanes, the same cracked asphalt, the same silent desert on either side. The hum of the road, the soft whisper of the tires. He glanced at the clock. 2:05 a.m. It had said 2:05 the last time he checked, pulling out of the gas station lot. He tapped the glass over the digits, as if that might jog them forward. The numbers stayed fixed, glowing their dull green. The CB crackled again, a short burst of static like a breath being drawn. Then a voice slipped through, thin and distant, as though traveling from far down a concrete tunnel. "Road's quiet tonight," the voice said. The same words Earl had used. The same tone, the same faint echo. Daniel reached for the radio, fingers hovering over the knob, then stopped. He did not press the button. He did not answer. He drove. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He checked his watch. The pale hands pointed to 2:06. Outside his windows, the desert seemed flatter, more uniform. The stars above shone, But he noticed something strange, a single bright point near the horizon that stayed in the same place no matter how far he went, as if painted on the glass of the sky. He tried the radio again, this time sliding the tuner across stations. Only static greeted him, in every direction, at every frequency. Even the usual late-night talk stations were gone. He rolled down his window an inch. Cool air slipped inside, carrying no scent at all. Not dust, not sagebrush, not exhaust. It was simply empty. Another sign loomed ahead. Gas, food, lodging, exit 247, 2 miles. This time his heart gave a quick, sharp jump. He watched the sign glide past, the edges of it caught in the beam of his headlights, then swallowed by the dark behind him. His palms felt damp on the steering wheel. The numbers on the dash clock remained at 25. The exit appeared again, curve and slope precisely as before, like a scene replaying on a loop. Beyond it, the same pocket of light, the same solitary pumps, the same old sedan, the motel sign stuttering between vacancy and a half-lit set of letters that meant nothing. His brain offered easy answers at first. Maybe he was more tired than he thought. Maybe he had dozed for a few seconds and dreamed that first stop. And now this was the real station. Except, in his cup holder, the paper cup from Sundown Gas and Market sat half full, its surface cooling under the faint breath of the air vents. He stared at it for a moment. The logo, an orange sun setting behind stylized mountains, smiled up at him. He knew, with the deepest, most practical part of himself, that stopping again would be unwise. Every instinct a long-haul driver cultivated situational awareness, timing, the art of balancing risk and rest, told him that some line had already been crossed. Still, as the ramp drew level with his cab, his hands moved. He eased the truck onto the exit, blinkers ticking in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The same frontage road, the same arrangement of lights, the same building, right down to the crooked letter on the Market sign. He could have been circling a model set built on some unseen tabletop. He pulled in and parked where he had before. Brakes hissed. Engine idled. The night pressed close around the cab, soft and heavy. Inside the station, the bell chimed as he pushed the glass door open. The sound wobbled slightly, playing back just a fraction of a second too late, like an audio track out of sync. Everything was in the same place. The shelves, the cooler, the maps, the lonely soda machine humming in the corner. Earl stood behind the counter, hands folded exactly as they had been. "Evening," Earl said. "Road's quiet tonight." Daniel's stomach nodded. His voice came out hoarse. "Have we met?" Earl tilted his head just a little. His pale eyes blinked once, slowly, like a lizard basking on a rock. "Seen a lot of drivers come through," he replied. "All start to look the same after a while." "The time," Daniel said. "What time is it?" Earl glanced at the clock above the door. The second hand was moving, but the minute hand was fixed. 2:05, he said. Daniel looked up. The clock's second hand ticked and ticked, completing a full circle, sweeping past the 12 again and again. But the minute hand never advanced. His heart thudded dully in his chest. He walked to the counter, slow and careful. "Is there another exit 247 on this highway?" "Not on this stretch," Earl answered. "Just the one." "Then how?" "Long road ahead," Earl cut in the exact same tone as before. "Best not to linger." The air inside the store felt thicker now, as if the walls were holding their breath. The hum of the coolers had grown louder, a deep background vibration. "Listen," Daniel said. "I've been driving this route a long time. I know this highway. I've never seen this place until tonight." Earl watched him. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. For a heartbeat, they seemed to go even paler, like glass fading to frost. "Sometimes," Earl said quietly, "the road picks people up. Sometimes it sets them down again, not always in the same place." A chill traced the back of Daniel's neck. "What do you mean?" Earl's gaze flicked past him toward the windows, where the empty lot reflected the interior lights. "Best not to linger," he repeated. But this time the words sounded different, less like a polite phrase, more like a warning. Daniel backed away from the counter. His boots felt heavy, as if the floor were trying to hold them. Outside, the night was still utterly windless. The motel loomed nearby, Every window dark except for one upstairs room where a faint glow spilled through the curtains, too dim to show any details inside. The car by the diner was the same make, the same color, the same dent in the rear bumper. He climbed back into his truck, started the engine almost before he closed the door, and pulled out of the lot without looking back. As soon as his tires hit the on-ramp, something changed. The sky, still crowded with stars, seemed to deepen as if a veil had been removed. The strange fixed point of light near the horizon dimmed and merged with the others. The smell of dust and distant dry plants slipped in through the window. He checked the dash clock. 2:14 a.m. The minutes had shifted at last. The CB came alive with a faint murmur of voices, other drivers chatting, weather reports from stations hundreds of miles away, the normal late-night noise. Music floated in from some forgotten station, a soft old song about the open road. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The rest of the run passed in ordinary silence. He reached the real state line truck stop around dawn, easing his rig into a parking space between two other trucks, the sky behind them glowing pink and gold. Inside the diner, he ordered eggs and toast from a server who had clearly been awake all night. When she set his plate down, he asked as casually as he could, "You ever hear of a place called Sundown Gas and Market? Sort of in between here and Port Laramie?" She frowned, thinking. "Out on the desert stretch? Yeah. There used to be a little station out there," she said slowly. "Same name, I think. Closed down years ago. Fellow who owned it passed, and they never reopened." "Why?" Daniel swallowed. "Just thought I saw it last night." The server shook her head. "Nah, nothing out there now but old concrete and some busted pumps. They even took the signs down after that big wreck." "What wreck?" She shrugged. "Pile up in the fog about 10 years back. Couple trucks, some cars. They say the highway got real strange for a while after that. Like it didn't know where it was supposed to be. State ended up straightening that section, putting in new markers and all." Her words hung in the air between them. Back in his truck, Daniel checked his logbook. His entries were normal. No missing time, no strange gaps. The fuel receipt from the last legitimate truck stop was tucked where it should be. On the passenger seat, his thermos sat empty. The paper cup from Sundown Gas and Market, however, was gone. In its place, in the cup holder, lay a small old-fashioned matchbook. On its cover, in faded letters, were the words, "Sundown Gas and Market, exit 247, open all night." The phone number printed beneath had too few digits. When he touched the cardboard, it felt oddly cool, no matter how warm the cab became. Daniel never used that route again. Other drivers still took it, of course. And every so often, someone mentioned an odd little station out in the middle of nowhere, a place that didn't show up on any GPS, where time seemed to slide a little sideways. Usually they laughed it off. A dream at the wheel. A trick of the mind. But there were certain details they always got right. The pale man behind the counter. The almost flavorless coffee. And the way the clock on the wall ticked and ticked, without ever quite moving forward. Story number 2. Maria liked the night shift. The highways felt different after dark, especially up in the mountains. Headlights carved small tunnels of visibility through the black, and the rest of the world fell away into shadow and cloud. Out there, it was just her and the truck and the white line sliding past. No office noise, no ringing phones, no rush hour madness, just the road. She ran auto parts from a distribution center in the valley to ports on the coast, cutting through a stretch of national forest where the highway climbed in long curves toward a cold, wind-scoured summit. Steep grades, narrow shoulders, runaway truck ramps every few miles. In the daytime, the route was busy. At night, it felt abandoned. Older drivers liked to warn the newer ones about that summit. Not about the curves or the weather that was obvious, but about something they called the caller. They told it the way people tell jokes, with a half smile that never quite reached their eyes. "Up by mile 63, signals get funny," they would say. "You'll hear somebody on Channel 19 asking for a ride down. If you're smart, you keep going." Maria never paid much attention to that talk. She had driven worse mountain passes in worse conditions. Ghost stories were something to pass the time, nothing more. On an early winter night, with a light mix of rain and wet snow spitting across her windshield, she climbed toward that summit again. Her trailer was half full, the weight riding steady. The engine hummed a low, comforting note. The digital clock on the dash read 1:12 a.m. Fog drifted in loose sheets across the highway, thicker in the cuts where dark furs crowded close to the shoulder. Her wipers moved in a steady rhythm, squeaking at the ends of their arcs. The outside world was reduced to 2 narrow lanes, a shaky metal guardrail, and the occasional reflective sign announcing yet another curve. The CB radio sat quiet in its bracket, turned on but low. Most nights she preferred the soft chatter of other drivers, weather updates, jokes, the half-serious arguments that never seemed to end. Tonight, the airwaves were mostly empty, just a wash of static and the occasional, far-off voice too faint to make out. She rolled past mile 58, then 59. The grade steepened, engine straining a little as she pulled the weight toward the sky. Snow on the trees thickened. The rain turned heavier, tapping louder on the glass. Just past mile 61, the static on the CB shifted. It picked up a slow, pulsing flutter, like someone breathing into a microphone far away. Maria reached out and turned the volume knob a little. "Breaker, breaker. Anybody eastbound, come back." The voice cut through the static so suddenly that her hand jerked back from the radio. It was a man's voice, low and rough with the kind of gravel that came from years of diesel and coffee. The tone was urgent but oddly flat, like someone calling out in a dream. Maria cleared her throat and leaned toward the microphone clipped beside the steering wheel. "Go ahead, driver," she said out of habit. "You're coming in a little scratchy." Static swallowed the cab for a few seconds. Then the same voice came again. "Eastbound, you got a copy? Stuck up by the chain-up area. Need a ride down to the valley. Anybody got room up front?" Maria frowned. She knew this stretch. The main chain-up area near the summit sat around mile 63. She hadn't reached it yet. "Where exactly you at?" she asked. "You mean the big gravel turnout by the closed way station?" The only response was the hiss of static, loud and dense, as if the channel had filled with wind. Then, under the noise, the man's voice again, exactly the same words, in exactly the same order. "Eastbound, you got a copy? Stuck up by the chain-up area. Need a ride down to the valley. Anybody got room up front?" Maria's fingers tightened on the wheel. A small itch of unease crawled along the back of her neck. She tried again. "Driver, I hear you. You broke down? You hurt? Say your location slow." Static, a faint pop. Then once more, unchanged. "Eastbound, you got a copy? Stuck up by the chain-up area. Need a ride down to the valley. Anybody got room up front?" The exact same rhythm, the same breathy pause before. Chain-up area. Maria reached forward and turned the radio down a little. Maybe someone was keying up a recording as a prank. It happened. Boredom could make people do strange things. The grade leveled slightly around a long left-hand curve. Just ahead, a green mile marker sign flashed in her headlights. 62. Fog thickened, swallowing the trees in smeared gray. Her world shrank to a floating rectangle of painted asphalt and tiny white dots along the shoulder. Up ahead, a yellow sign glowed into view. Chain. Up area. 1 mile. Her memory supplied a clear picture of that place. A wide gravel turnout on the right. A rusted metal shed. A row of old orange barrels. The remains of a way station that had closed years ago when the state moved operations to a newer facility down the mountain. As she approached the area, the CB crackled again, louder now. The same voice, closer somehow, as if the man were leaning right up to her speaker. "Anybody eastbound? Talk to Grey Dog, come on back. I'm stuck up at the chains. Need a ride down to the valley. Anybody got room?" This time, the words sounded a little different, the phrasing loose. "Roads iced up bad. Can't get this rig moving. Grey Dog. A handle. Not unusual." But the way he said, "iced up," made Maria glance at the wet pavement. It was cold, but the temperature gauge sat a few degrees above freezing. The rain might turn, but not yet. "You up at mile 63? By the station?" She tried one more time. "I'm coming through in about 2 minutes. You need a tow or an ambulance?" No answer. Just that heavy static. The chain-up area appeared in the beams of her headlights, a yawning patch of gravel, slick with rain, edges fading into darkness. The old way station was a square, windowless block, crouched near the back, its paint streaked and peeling. And in the middle of the turnout, Facing the highway sat a semi. It looked like an older cab-over model, white or maybe light blue under the road grime, with a narrow sleeper and no trailer. Hazard lights blinked in slow, steady flashes, orange against the wet night. The cab's side window appeared dark. No movement. No one outside. Maria's foot hovered over the brake. Training and instinct battled in her head. A stopped truck with hazards could mean trouble. A stranded driver. Someone sick. But something about the scene pressed against her sense of normal. There was no exhaust plume at the back of the cab, even in the cold. No white fog of breath near the door. The hazard lights blinked, but she couldn't hear the usual clicking relay, even with her window cracked an inch. The air around that turnout felt hollow. She forced herself to look at the mile marker just past the chain-up spot. 63. Her CB meter needle spiked suddenly, jumping all the way to the right. The speaker remained silent. Then, softly, as if from far inside the dashboard, the same whisper, "Anybody eastbound come back, need a ride down." She kept rolling. Not speeding, not swerving, just not stopping. The turnout slid past on her right. In the corner of her eye, she thought she saw movement, someone standing near the cab's open passenger door, an arm raising, a figure in a reflective jacket. When she glanced directly, the shape seemed to dissolve into rain and shadow. The grade began to tip downward. Her engines eased, the rig starting its long descent toward the valley. She reached for the CB and flipped the power switch off. The small red light went dark. The steady background noise of the radio cut out, leaving the cab filled with only the hum of tires and the swish of wipers. For a few brief seconds, the quiet felt like a relief. Then, from the dark speaker, the voice came again, clearer now. Closer. No static at all. "Thanks for stopping, driver." Knew somebody would. Maria's chest seized. Her hand flew back to the radio, fingers running over it. The switch was definitely off. The display was blank. She checked the mirrors. Highway behind. Empty. Shoulders. Clear. No vehicles close enough to bleed into her electronics. The air inside the cab cooled abruptly, as if someone had opened a door she couldn't see. Her breath left a faint cloud on the windshield. She forced her voice to sound steady. "Who is this?" "Name's Grey Dog," the voice said. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere, partly from the speaker, partly from the overhead console, partly from the thin metal skin of the doors. "Been trying to get off that hill a long time." Behind her, somewhere in the narrow sleeper, something creaked softly, like weight shifting on the mattress. Maria's eyes stayed locked on the road. "You in my truck?" A dry chuckle slid through the cab. "Don't mean no harm, ma'am. Just needed a ride down. Didn't think you'd mind sharing the cab." Her right hand, resting on the passenger seat, suddenly brushed against something that hadn't been there a moment before. Rough fabric. Cold. The distinct give of a jacket sleeve. She snatched her hand back. The passenger seat next to her looked empty, just the worn gray upholstery and a few receipts. But when she glanced at the side window, she saw, faintly reflected in the glass, the outline of another person. A man sat in the passenger seat according to the reflection. Baseball cap pulled low. High visibility vest. Hands resting calmly on his knees. His features were blurred, like a photo taken right as someone turned away. Every hair along Maria's arm stood up. She did not look directly at the seat. She kept her eyes on the ribbon of road dropping away before her, broken only by the occasional curve sign and the ghostly glow of distant valley lights far below. "How long have you been calling?" she asked, her voice thin in her own ears. There was a long pause. "Hard to tell," Grey Dog answered. Quieter now. Storm came in fast. Road iced over. Jackknife up ahead blocked the lane. Tried to chain up, but didn't make it. Been up there ever since, I think. Radio's all I got. His words were calm, almost conversational. That chilled her more than anger would have. "You wrecked?" she asked carefully. "They never found you?" "Found the truck," he said. "Heard him on the scanner once, talking about it. Said they'd tow it off after the weather broke." His voice faded, then strengthened again. "Guess they did. Guess they took me with it. Just not all the way." A sign flashed by. "Steep grade next, 6 miles." Maria downshifted, letting the engine brake take some of the load. Her hands had steadied on the wheel, but her shoulders ached from the tension. Why me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. You answered, Grey Dog said simply. Lots of trucks gone by, heard their engines, seen their lights. He paused, couldn't get through, like hollering across a canyon. You're the first that heard me clear. The road curved, guardrail hugging a sheer drop. Far below, the valley floor glimmered faintly, the suggestion of a river like a darker thread. The cold around her began to lift, just a fraction. The windshield cleared more quickly, the heater's breath felt stronger. The invisible weight on the passenger side eased, as if someone were slowly leaning back, relaxing. Once I get down, Grey Dog said almost to himself. Maybe the line'll quit crackling. Been hearing the same minute over and over. Chain up area. Hazards flashing. Waiting. For a ride that never it just keeps. His voice stuttered, like a record catching on a scratch. For a heartbeat, Maria heard the earlier phrase again, layered under his words. Anybody eastbound? You got a copy? Then he seemed to shake himself free of it. Sorry, he murmured. Gets tangled sometimes. You keep your eyes on the road, ma'am. Watch the next switchback. Folks, take it too fast. She took it slower than she normally would, truck leaning slightly as it eased around the curve. Her headlights swept across a set of scars in the guardrail, long, ragged scrapes in the metal where something big had hit and kept going. As she straightened out, the radio on the dash flickered. For a second, music bled in tinny guitar from some faraway station, then cut off. The red display glowed, then dimmed, then steadied. Almost there, Grey Dog said softly. The valley lights were brighter now, the grades smoothing as the highway threaded through lower, kinder hills. You drive good, solid, take your time, no need to rush. She realized that her heart had stopped pounding quite so hard. She realized, too, that despite the cold and the odd, reflected outline, she no longer felt as if something meant her harm. Unsettled, yes. Frightened, absolutely, but not in danger. Just past mile 49, where the road straightened and the last of the steep descent ended, a thin warmth brushed her cheek, like a draft from an open door, but this time carrying a hint of sun-warmed dust instead of freezer air. Here's good, Grey Dog said. His voice was already fading. Rest of the way's easy. Appreciate the lift, driver. Been wanting to see the valley again. Maria swallowed. You, going to be okay? Silence stretched. Then, faintly, I think so. Road's clearer down here. Her cab's temperature gauge crept back up to normal. The glass stopped fogging. Outside, the rain lightened to a fine mist. The heavy pressure that had settled on the passenger side of the truck was gone. The reflection in the side window showed only her now, alone behind the wheel. Ahead, the first sodium lamps of the valley town shimmered in the damp air. Maria drove the last miles in a dazed quiet, hands moving on the wheel almost automatically. At the truck stop near the bottom of the pass, she pulled in, set her brakes, and sat still for a full minute, listening to the familiar ticking of a cooling engine. No stray voices, no strange chill. Inside, she ordered coffee and a late-night breakfast at the counter. The server, a man with deep lines around his eyes, poured her mug full and nodded toward a bulletin board on the wall behind the register. You hauling the pass tonight? He asked. Weather bad up there? Wet. Maria's own voice sounded distant. Foggy. Not too much ice yet. He grunted. Better than the blizzard years back. Took a few good drivers then. On the bulletin board, amid delivery notices and hand-scribbled ads, a laminated photo caught her eye. A man in a ball cap leaned against a semi, smiling at the camera. The name written in marker beneath it read, In memory of Ray Grey Dog Harlan, lost on the summit, the 12th of January, 2007. Keep the shiny side up. Maria stared at the date. The exact day and month, but many years earlier. She did not tell the server what had happened in her cab. Instead, she finished her coffee, checked the weather report on the television quietly glowing above the counter, and headed back out to her truck. On her next few runs over the summit, the CB was ordinary. Static, jokes, the occasional weather warning, no looping calls, no strange hazy silhouettes in the glass at night. But once, during a storm when snow fell thick, and the chain-up area filled with hazard lights and orange vests. Her radio hissed softly. Under the noise, a calm, familiar voice said, very clearly, "Road's slick, but it'll hold. Take the left lane over the crown. You're good, driver. Keep the shiny side up." She followed the advice without thinking, feeling the tires grip a bit more firmly than they would have on the rutted right lane. Her trailer held steady. Other trucks slipped a little as they fought their way over. When she glanced at the passenger window, the reflection showed only the dark and her own small outline at the wheel. Yet she found herself nodding once to the empty seat beside her. After that, whenever she climbed toward mile 63, she turned the CB volume just a little higher. Not because she was afraid of the caller, but because the road seemed quieter when his voice was out there, somewhere in the static, no longer begging for a ride down, but watching the mountain the way only someone who had been trapped on it too long could. Story number 3. Jared liked night runs for one simple reason. The world shrank down to what his headlights could touch. By day, the interstate across the plains felt endless and exposed. Giant billboards, farm equipment crossing at odd angles, sun glare bouncing off windshields. But after midnight, it all quieted. The flat fields dissolved into smudges of dark, and the sky felt closer, a low dome pricked with stars and distant blinking towers. He was hauling a 48-foot dry van westbound, somewhere between small Midwestern towns that all seemed to share the same faded gas stations and lonely grain elevators. It was late autumn, and the air outside was cold but not yet bitter, the kind that made the engine run smooth and the windows fog just a little at the corners. According to the paperwork clipped neatly on his passenger seat, the load was simple. Boxed consumer electronics. From a regional warehouse, headed to a large chain store's distribution hub, 2 states over. Pallets of sealed cardboard, shrink-wrapped and strapped, nothing unusual. The bills of lading checked out. The weight matched what he felt when he eased the rig onto the scales leaving the yard. He had loaded, sealed, and locked the trailer himself. That was one of the perks of this particular gig. No question about what went inside. Company seal, company padlock, both numbers written on the manifest in his own spare block letters. The road ahead was empty, a dark ribbon splitting vast tracts of harvested fields and fallow ground. His dashboard clock glowed 12:41 a.m. A faint wind nudged the trailer now and then, not enough to move him, just enough to remind him that on either side of that ribbon was open land. He rolled his shoulders, listening to the small familiar rattles and hums inside the cab. Thermos half full beside him. CB turned low. A talk radio host on the AM band murmured about something political, his voice the same as every other night, a constant background drone. The first sound came between mile markers 213 and 214. It was small and contained, a dull thump from somewhere behind him, as if someone had dropped a heavy book onto a wooden floor inside the trailer. He glanced into his mirrors out of instinct, though of course he could see nothing. Just the long white box of the van behind him, lit in his running lights, tires turning harmlessly along the lane. Another bump followed, slightly sharper, followed by a faint scrape. Jared frowned. Freight could shift. It wasn't good, but it happened if something hadn't been strapped right, or if a pallet had been loaded a bit crooked. Still, the drive had been smooth and straight. No hard corners, no sudden stops. And he knew how those pallets had sat when he closed the doors. He turned down the radio, listening. Silence, the engine's low rumble, the faint roar of tires on dry asphalt. He told himself it was probably nothing. Maybe a corner of plastic wrap had torn, letting a box slide a few inches. The weight felt the same on his pull. The trailer wasn't tugging or swaying. He drove on. 5 minutes later, just past a little exit for a town that seemed to consist of a single dim gas station and a shuttered motel. The sound came again. This time it was different. 3 distinct knocks, evenly spaced, from the very rear of the trailer. Like someone rapping on the inside of the door. Jared's hands tightened on the wheel before he could stop them. His eyes snapped to the mirrors again. The white rectangle of the trailer roll-up door rode there, steady in the glow from his marker lights. No movement, no swinging. The padlock and seal should have been hanging untouched, though he couldn't make them out from this angle. He swallowed. The air inside the cab suddenly felt drier. Slowly, he reached for the CB mic clipped to the dash, more for the comfort of the familiar motion than any real plan. "Anybody westbound around mile 215 hear that?" he asked, half joking, half hoping. "Thought I had a hitchhiker in the box for a second." Only static rolled back through the speaker. The channel had been quiet for a while. The graveyard hours, most trucks already parked tight in rest areas and truck stops lights out. He debated pulling over. Company policy was clear. If he suspected a problem with the load, he was supposed to stop somewhere safe and check it. But out here, somewhere safe was a relative idea. The next rest area was 20 miles ahead, according to the last green sign. The shoulder was narrow and dark. No streetlights, no cameras, only open fields and a thin line of trees far off to the side. Another muffled thud sounded, more of a boom this time, accompanied by a soft vibration he could feel through the cab floor. "That's not nothing," he muttered. He eased his foot off the accelerator, letting the truck roll to a more cautious speed. The engine brake hummed, holding his descent on a long, gentle slope. Overhead, the clouds shifted, revealing a scatter of stars before closing again. The road ahead bent slowly in a wide curve, disappearing behind a low hill. In the mirror, for just a flicker of a moment, something changed. The rear doors of the trailer, framed in red marker lights, looked wrong. Not open, not obviously damaged, but somehow less solid, as if he were seeing them through heat shimmer on a summer afternoon. He blinked. The shimmer vanished. The doors looked perfectly normal again. The hair on the back of his neck prickled. He ran through possibilities. An animal trapped inside somehow, though he'd watched the loading dock the entire time. A person stowing away? Impossible. He had checked the trailer before backing into the bay. Empty. Clean. No place to hide. Still, those knocks had sounded too precise to ignore. He made a decision. The next exit sign showed up. A simple one-lane off-ramp leading to a farm road and a flashing yellow light. It wasn't ideal, but he wasn't going to keep barreling along with unexplained thuds behind him. He flipped on his blinker, guided the rig down the ramp, and came to a stop on the wide gravel shoulder beneath the blinking yellow bulb. The surrounding land was flat and dark, no houses nearby, just a faint glow on the horizon where some distant town slept. He set the brakes. The airlines hissed and settled. Engine still running low, he grabbed his flashlight and climbed down from the cab, boots crunching on gravel. The night wrapped around him with surprising thickness. Away from the insulated bubble of the truck, the cold reached under his jacket, and the silence pressed in, only interrupted by the tick-tick-tick of hot metal cooling. He walked along the driver's side of the trailer, sweeping the flashlight beam along the tires and undercarriage. All looked normal. No flat spots, no dragging straps, no visible damage. At the rear, he lifted the beam higher. The padlock hung from the latch, gleaming dully. The company seal, a bright plastic strip with a unique number embossed on it, sat unbroken in place. Jared moved the flashlight closer to read it. The number matched the one on his manifest. He checked it twice. Nothing had been opened. He listened. The night answered with its broad, empty quiet. No tapping, no sliding boxes. No breath held behind steel walls. Feeling foolish, he placed one palm flat against the cold metal door. Through the thickness, he could hear the faintest murmur, the shifting of air inside, the residual swaying of pallets. "Anybody in there?" he said, knowing how ridiculous it was. His own voice sounded smaller than he liked in the open night. There was no response. He thought about breaking the seal anyway, just to be sure. But that would mean paperwork, phone calls, explanations about why he'd unsealed a perfectly fine load on the side of a rural ramp in the middle of the night. And the part of him that had spent years on the road, that had seen how sometimes minds played tricks when the clock crept past midnight, reminded him that no one had any business being in that trailer in the first place. Logic said it was just freight shifting against freight. He gave the doors one last look, then walked back to the cab, boots crunching a little too loudly in the gravel, as if the night were listening. Inside, he shut the door and locked it out of habit. The cabin light cast a soft yellow glow as he settled behind the wheel. A faint smell reached him then, cutting through the scents of coffee and diesel and worn fabric. It was subtle, almost not there, like old smoke and something dusty. Not fresh smoke from a cigarette or engine, but the stale, baked-in kind that clung to curtains long after a fire had gone out. He sniffed once sharply. The smell was gone. He chalked it up to his imagination and pulled back onto the highway. The miles unspooled again. The yellow exit light fell behind. The road returned to its dark, straight regularity. For about half an hour, nothing else happened. The knocks did not repeat. The trailer pulled fine. Traffic remained thin, an occasional car overtaking him, a pair of headlights appearing far behind, fading again. Then he noticed the weight. It was subtle at first. A slight difference in how the truck climbed a shallow grade, how the engine worked a little harder than it should have for the same speed. He checked his gauges. Everything normal. Temperatures where they should be. Fuel consumption steady. He knew the feel of his rig. The way 70,000 pounds sat on the frame was different from 60, different from 50. Right now, it felt like he'd added 5 or 10,000 pounds in the space of an hour, which of course he had not. The numbers on his paperwork, the weight on the scale ticket, all matched. There was nothing to add weight out here. No stops, no surprise loading docks hiding in the cornfields. He frowned and leaned forward a little, scanning the mirrors. The trailer rode level. The tires didn't seem overburdened. No sparks. No dragging. The smell came back. Stronger. Old smoke, and beneath it, something like melted plastic and hot dust. The way a garage might smell weeks after something electrical had shorted and charred the inside of a box. Jared's chest tightened. The idea formed before he could stop it. Was there a fire starting in the trailer? He checked his mirrors again, searching for any hint of flame reflection, any twist of dark smoke against the night. Nothing. The CB hissed softly. A voice crackled through, faint and warped, as if traveling from much farther away than its signal should allow. "Can you hear me?" Jared jerked, hand finding the mic almost involuntarily. "You're breaking up," he said, voice rough. "Say again?" Static poured through the speakers, a dry rushing sound. Underneath it, like a whisper down a long hallway, the voice came again. Too heavy, too hot. Then it was gone. The channel went dead. He stared at the CB for a long moment. The display numbers glowed their steady green. Channel 19. Normal. No error lights. He told himself someone else on the highway was having a bad night. A blown tire. An overheating engine. It had nothing to do with his trailer, his mysterious knocks, his sudden phantom weight. And yet, the next rest area sign showed up on the right, promising bathrooms and vending machines and truck parking in 2 miles. The choice sat there, clear and plain. This time, he did not argue with himself. He guided his rig off at the rest area, following the curved entry road through a stand of leafless trees. Sodium lights washed the parking lot in uneven orange patches, leaving deep shadows between the long rows. Only a few other trucks were there, mostly dark, curtains drawn in their sleepers. A couple of cars clustered near the building. Everything looked quiet. He pulled into a spot along the outer edge, nose pointed toward the exit, and set his brakes. The trailer rocked softly as the suspension settled. The moment the pressure equalized, another sound came from behind him. A heavy, slow slide, as if something large had shifted its weight across the trailer floor. Jared sat still, heart beating a little too fast. The smell of old smoke was now unmistakable, threading through the cab from behind, faint but persistent. He reached for his flashlight again, then hesitated. A thought drifted up from some half-remembered conversation in a truck stop months ago. 2 drivers at the next table, talking about loads and shortcuts and things best left alone. They say that lane's cursed ever since that fire. Could smell it for miles, even after they cleaned it up. He hadn't paid much attention then. Just another piece of road lore. Now, his mind latched onto it. He got out and walked back along the truck, boots echoing on the concrete. The rest area was nearly silent, just the distant rush of highway noise and the hum of lights. At the back of his trailer, he aimed his beam at the doors. The padlock gleamed dully. The seal still hung intact, but the white paint on the door looked different now. In the harsh beam of the flashlight, faint, uneven, darker patches showed ghostly rectangles and streaks, as if something had once been burned there and painted over. The texture was just a little rougher in certain spots, tiny blisters under the fresh coat. He reached out and touched one of the darker areas. The metal felt cool, but under his fingers, the paint was slightly bubbled, like a surface that had once been heated too far. A whisper of a memory surfaced. An article he'd read online. Some accident way out on a lonely stretch of this same interstate years ago. A truck, hauling electronics, had caught fire from faulty wiring. The flames had raced through the trailer, feeding on plastic and packaging. The driver hadn't made it out. He had driven that story's stretch of road since without thinking much about it. He looked down at the metal plate bolted near the handle, the one stamped with the trailer's identification number. He had seen it 100 times in a hurry, but now he focused on the small digits and letters. The number matched his dispatch sheet. The company had a habit of rotating trailers through the yard. This was just another unit. Underneath the main plate, barely visible where old paint had chipped just so, was the faintest imprint of another set of characters, almost sanded away. As if another plate had once sat there. Maybe, he thought uneasily, from a time before the trailer had been refitted, repainted, renumbered. He forced that line of thinking away. Trailers changed hands. Companies bought and sold them. Paint hid histories all the time. But the smell... He pressed his ear against the cool metal, ignoring how strange it felt to do it. For a long moment, he heard only his own breathing and the distant whir of the highway. Then, so faint he almost dismissed it, he caught another sound. A dry, rasping breath. Too heavy, a voice murmured, muffled by steel and insulation. Too hot. Jared jerked back. His flashlight wobbled, beam skittering across the lot. Logic tried to reassert itself. Sound carried in odd ways. Echoes from another truck. His own thoughts rebounding back at him. He stood there longer than he meant to, breathing shallowly, waiting for something else. Another word. Another thump. Nothing came. If there really was heat building in that trailer, if a pallet had shifted onto some hidden fault, pinching a wire or breaking something, the last place he wanted to be was staring at the doors when they blew. Decision settled on him like a weight of its own. He needed to see inside, seal or no seal. He took out his keys, found the thin blade he kept for just such situations, and cut the plastic strip with one clean motion. He unlatched the hasp and slid off the padlock, metal clinking softly. He paused, hand on the handle, then hauled the roll-up door skyward. Cool night air rushed inside. His flashlight beam stabbed into the trailer's depths. Rows of pallets sat there, wrapped in clear plastic dull with warehouse dust. Boxes bearing familiar brand logos faced him in orderly stacks. Nothing was toppled. Nothing was burnt or scorched. No smoke smoldered from hidden corners. His shoulders sagged, part relief, part embarrassment. He climbed up onto the trailer floor and walked down the narrow center aisle between pallets. The metal under his boots felt normal, solid, room temperature. He reached the front wall, turned, and shone his light slowly along both sides, searching for any sign of charring, any irregular patch in the flooring or walls. Halfway back, on the left-hand side, just above floor level where the plywood lining met the metal frame, he found it. A small, warped patch of paneling, maybe a foot wide, where the grain had blistered and twisted. Someone had sanded and repainted it, but the warping remained, a subtle ripple against the otherwise flat surface. He touched it. This time, his fingers encountered not just cool wood but something else, the slightest residual warmth, as if a handheld heater had been pointed at that spot hours ago and just turned off. He jerked his hand back. Behind him, at the open end of the trailer, the lot lights seemed farther away. The world narrowed to the cone of his flashlight and the fragile structures of cardboard and stretch film around him. Too heavy, the same quiet voice sighed, so close it could have been inches from his ear. Jared spun, heart hammering. The trailer was empty of anything living, just pallets and shadows. He knew with a sudden, absolute certainty that whatever had once happened in a trailer like this one, maybe in this very metal shell, under a previous number had stamped itself so deep into the frame that it had not entirely left. Something about that remembered fire, that overloaded hall, that driver who had been trapped in a box as heat built and plastic fumes grew thick, lingered like old smoke in a curtain. And now, carrying a similar load along the same lonely stretch of highway, Jared had woken it up. He backed out, boots loud on the metal. At the door, he paused once more and looked down the rows of silent freight. "I hear you," he said quietly, feeling foolish and oddly earnest at the same time. "I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'll get this checked." The air in the trailer seemed to lighten, like a held breath let go. He closed the door and latched it, pocketing the cut seal. Inside the cab, he called his dispatcher, voice steady as he explained that he'd broken the seal due to suspicious sounds and was bringing the load into the next scale house for inspection. He expected pushback, irritation, questions about delays and extra stops. Instead, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You're on I-74, right?" the dispatcher asked slowly. "Westbound past Merton?" "Yeah." A soft exhale. "If you're feeling anything off on that stretch, you go ahead and have it checked. Don't worry about the seal. We'll log it. Let me know what the scale house says about your weight. They've had issues out there before." The pause carried more than he said. Back on the highway, the truck felt different. Lighter, somehow. The engine didn't strain as it had. The smell had thinned to almost nothing. At the state-run scale, the inspector had him pull onto the platform and wait. Numbers flickered on their readout. He expected the same weight he'd left the warehouse with. "You're over by 800, the inspector said, leaning out of the booth. "You see that on your load slip?" Jared blinked. "My slip says I'm under by 300. They compared papers. Somewhere along the way, a number had been copied wrong at the shipping office. The pallets were slightly heavier than listed, not enough to scream emergency, but enough to put him over the legal limit. Enough that a long descent on a hot day or a missed gear on a steep hill could stress the rig far more than planned. Company policy demanded they offload a pallet, adjust the distribution, fix the paperwork. It took time. It meant more calls, more small apologies. As he waited in the scale parking lot, sipping coffee from a vending machine that tasted faintly of soap, Jared thought about the weight he'd felt in his gut when he'd first heard those knocks. The sense that something was insisting he pay attention. On the corkboard inside the scale office, tucked among safety posters and regulations, a yellowed newspaper clipping caught his eye. A photograph of a smoking wreckage by the roadside, twisted trailer frame, melted siding. The headline, "Overloaded rig ignites. Driver lost on I-74. The year in the corner was more than a decade past." The company name on the blackened door was not his. But the description, electronics, westbound, late at night, was close enough to make his hands feel cold. He drove the rest of that night more carefully than he ever had, every small sound rising and falling in his awareness. The trailer, now properly weighted and inspected, rode smooth and compliant. He never smelled the old smoke again, but every so often, on other lonely stretches with other loads, when he was tempted to ignore a faint rattle or shrug off a minor warning light to save a few minutes, a quiet phrase seemed to brush the back of his mind like a whisper. "Too heavy, too hot," and he would find himself easing off the throttle, checking his gauges twice, listening to his rig with renewed attention. For all the miles he drove after that, he never again dismissed odd knocks from the darkness behind him as just freight. Out on the long, empty roads, he had learned that sometimes the past reached forward, carrying lessons in the shape of unnerving sounds and thin wisps of impossible smell. Whatever voice had spoken to him that night, whatever imprint of a driver who had once learned too late what an extra few thousand pounds could mean, it had saved him from making the same quiet, catastrophic miscalculation. Out where the headlight beams ended and the planes rolled on unseen, something in the lingering smoke had not been ready to see another truck burn. Story number 4. Thomas had always liked the mountain runs more than the long, flat stretches. There was something honest about a road that admitted it was dangerous. The grade signs, the runaway ramps, the low stone walls along steep drops, all of it reminded drivers that the line between safe and not was thin and demanded respect. You stayed alert on those roads. You didn't have the luxury of drifting. He had been hauling groceries for the same regional chain for over a decade. Twice a week, his route took him through a cut in the Appalachian foothills, along a highway that threaded one particular tunnel, Briar Ridge. Briar Ridge Tunnel wasn't very long, half a mile, maybe a bit less. 4 lanes through solid rock, arch ceiling, orange sodium lights all the way through. Thomas had driven it in daylight, at dusk, in pounding rain, and in calm moonlit hours. It was just another landmark to him, a notch on the run. Other drivers felt differently. He'd heard it first over coffee at a truck stop a few exits east of the mountains, years earlier. An older guy with gray in his beard and a patched ball cap had pointed at the television mounted in the corner, where grainy footage of a backup near Briar Ridge played. "Never did trust that tube," the man had muttered. "Bad air, bad luck. They should have blown a new hole and sealed that one up." Thomas remembered asking why. Had a big one in their back before they put in all them new fans, the man had said. Pile up in the smoke. Some hazmat load lit. Off. Took 'em hours to get folks out. My cousin swore after that he'd never drive it again at night. Stories got around in trucking. Some stuck, some didn't. Thomas filed that one away in the mental drawer of things to think about, but not obsess over. On an early spring night years later, he was back on that same route, westbound with a full load. The weather reports had mentioned light rain and patchy fog in the higher elevations, nothing severe. His refrigerated trailer hummed quietly behind him, full of produce and dairy products that needed to be at a western distribution center by morning. The dash clock glowed 1:27 a.m. The traffic thinned as he left the last suburban cluster behind and began the climb toward Briar Ridge. Trees closed in on either side, dark bare branches knitting over rock cuts. His headlights caught the reflective backs of warning signs as he rolled. Steep grade, tunnel ahead, radio station for traffic info, 1620 a.m. He flicked on the CB out of habit, the speaker on low. Just soft, static. The AM weather channel crackled clearly, a calm voice listing mile markers and conditions. Light precipitation near the summit, fog in low-lying areas, no reported incidents. All lanes open at Briar Ridge Tunnel. Thomas drummed his fingers once on the steering wheel and settled in. He knew every curve on this stretch, the long left sweeper past the old quarry, the right-hand bend where deer liked to appear without warning, the straightaway that led into the gentle S-turn before the tunnel mouth. Sign: Briar Ridge Tunnel 2 miles. Rain dotted the windshield, fine and cold. He watched the wipers sweep it aside. As he rounded the curve just before the straightaway, the fog arrived. It came not as a gradual thickening, but as a wall. One moment the road ahead was clear, the next it was swallowed. Visibility collapsed to a few truck lengths. The high beams turned the mist white and useless. He dropped back to low beams, easing off the accelerator, foot ready. Okay, he murmured, more to himself than to the truck. Nice and easy. The pavement under his tires still felt solid, no hint of hydroplaning. His headlights painted twin gold funnels into the gray. The faint white stripes of the lane just visible. Somewhere in the muffled world outside, a radio tower light blinked red on a ridge. He saw it only as an orange smear through the haze. The tunnel's advanced signage loomed out of the fog. Turn on headlights. No stopping. Maintain speed. The familiar rectangular outline of the overhead sign that always made him feel like he was about to enter a lit cave. Another sign, just beyond it, caught his eye. A simple green board with white letters. Briar Ridge Tunnel. Length 0.5 miles. Next exit 12 miles. The numbers gave him a small, comforting anchor. Half a mile. Less than a minute inside. Even at a cautious speed. He checked his gauges again. Everything sat where it should. The CB crackled softly with distant, indistinct talk. As he drew closer, the tunnel mouth emerged a black semicircle lined with concrete, lights glowing amber inside. The fog thinned right at the entrance, as if unwilling to go in. Thomas centered his rig in the right lane, took a steadying breath, and drove into Briar Ridge. The world changed instantly. The rain noise cut off. The hiss of tires on wet pavement became a hollow echo. The orange tunnel lights washed the interior in endless late-afternoon tones. He glanced in his mirrors. Behind him, the fog billowed at the entrance, erasing the highway he'd just left. Ahead of him, the tunnel curved gently, its far end not yet visible. He kept his speed modest, tires humming. He'd done this dozens of times. 30 seconds passed. 40. The tunnel did not end. The CB hissed, then went strangely flat. Not louder, if anything, quieter. As if someone had turned down the background noise of the world. The GPS screen, which usually showed a blank gap over the tunnel with a little moving arrow, flickered, then froze entirely. His phone lost signal, as expected, but this felt more complete, somehow, like being under not just rock but something heavier. He frowned, eyes tracking the reflective markers along the wall. The spacing between the emergency exit alcoves seemed wrong. They came too close together, then too far apart. A sign on the right flashed in his headlights. Emergency phone, 500 feet. He knew those phones had been removed years before. Budget cuts, and cell phones had made them obsolete. As he drove, his headlights caught one of the alcoves full on. A red metal emergency phone box hung on the wall. Intact, cord dangling, handset in place. Thomas's grip on the wheel tightened. They definitely removed those. The floor of the tunnel had changed too. The lane striping, which he knew had been repainted with modern bright reflective paint, looked older, faded, with the occasional worn gap that reminded him of roads from his childhood. His dash clock blinked once, twice. The time display glitched, showing 1 to 28, then 1 to 28 again, then briefly impossibly 12:14 before snapping back. He shook his head once, as if to clear water from his ears. Electrical interference, he muttered, aware of how flimsy it sounded. Up ahead, twin red dots appeared in the distance taillights. Another vehicle in the tunnel with him finally. Relief slid through him. Any company was welcome in that stretched, echoing space. He eased off the throttle another hair, not wanting to rush up on the slower vehicle too quickly. As he did, the CB crackled again. "Traffic's thick in here tonight," a man's voice said, faint and tinny. "Can't see worth beans." The voice sounded old-fashioned, somehow not elderly, but from another time. The cadence, the choice of words. Thomas reached for his mic. "Briar Ridge westbound," he said. "You got a copy, driver? You ahead of me in the right lane?" Silence, then just the hiss of empty channel. He watched the red dots. They didn't grow larger or smaller. They just hung there at the edge of his visibility, always the same distance away, perfectly centered. Thomas glanced in his mirrors again. For a moment, in the convex right mirror, he saw more than just his trailer and the tunnel lights. He saw other vehicles behind him. Headlights at different heights, the low beams of cars, the brighter spots of trucks. Shapes suggested in the reflection. A boxy older cab over, a sedan with a chrome bumper that threw back the tunnel light in glints. He blinked and looked again. The mirror showed only the smooth white side of his trailer and the repeating lamps on the tunnel wall. The smell changed. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing like the sharp tang of fresh smoke or burning oil. It was subtler. A stale, closed-in odor slid into the cab, riding under the normal scents. Old exhaust, overheated brakes, the dry, slightly metallic hint of air that had once been very hot. His throat prickled. The red dots ahead of him dipped slightly, then rose, as if the vehicle they belonged to hit a minor bump. They still didn't get any closer. The CB burst into life again, louder this time. Hold your lane," a different voice urged, tight with controlled panic. "Don't slam 'em. You'll jackknife it. Just ride it out." Another voice cried something unintelligible, high and thin, and cut off. In the background, Thomas thought he heard horns blaring, the crunch and scrape of metal, all buried under a layer of static, as if under thick water. He swallowed hard, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He knew, suddenly and with sick certainty, what this sounded like. Not live chatter. Not truckers up ahead right now. Recordings. Echoes of that night everyone talked about in half-whispers. The big accident. The hazmat load. The pileup. He stared at the endless curve of tunnel, the unchanging red lights, the two pale lane markings. "Half a mile," the sign had said. He felt like he'd been in here for 5. His knuckles went white on the wheel. Not real, he told himself quietly. Just memory. Metal and concrete holding onto something. The CB clicked, as if someone had keyed up from right beside him. "Westbound in the grocery wagon," a calm voice said. Closer now, less distorted. "You're running a little hot on fear there, partner. Keep her between the lines." Thomas froze. He hadn't given his load away on the radio, hadn't said groceries, hadn't shared his company name. The truck itself was unmarked white, no flashy logo. He reached for the mic anyway. "You talking to me?" His voice came out clearer than he felt. "You got a handle, driver?" The pause that followed was so long he wondered if he'd imagined the whole thing. Then, "Used to go by Beacon," the man said. "Not that it matters much now." The tone was weary but steady, like someone who'd been awake too long and had passed through panic into a strange, calm watchfulness. Thomas licked his lips. "You up ahead in that rig in front of me?" A soft chuckle filtered through the speaker. Something like that. The red dots ahead flickered, brighter for a second, as if in answer. Tunnel ain't right tonight, Beacon went on. It does this sometimes. When the weather's thick and the time's just so. Stretches. Gets itself tangled. Folks see more than just concrete and rock. Thomas's skin crawled. How long does it last? Depends, came the reply. Last time I was in the thick of it, felt like hours. Outside, they said it was minutes. You don't want to lose your head in here, though. That's when she keeps you. She? Thomas repeated. The road, the rock, whatever it is that remembers. A faint sigh. Listen to me. You feel your wheels under you? Traction good? Thomas forced himself to check in with his body. Foot on the pedal. The dull feedback of tires on asphalt. The gentle vibration in the steering column. Solid. Centered. Yeah, he said. Feels fine. Then you hold that line. Don't mash the brakes unless you absolutely have to. Don't chase them lights ahead and don't look too hard at what's in the glass behind. You hear me? In spite of the surreal situation, Thomas found himself nodding. Copy. The smell of old heat strengthened, then thinned, like someone had opened and closed an oven door somewhere in the tunnel. His eyes watered slightly. Up ahead, the red lights dipped again. For a heartbeat, in that dip, his headlights picked out the shape they belonged to. It was an older tractor, the kind with a boxier nose that hadn't been made in years. Its trailer was a plain, unmarked gray. The reflective tape along the bumper had a pattern he recognized from old photographs, the kind regulations had since updated. As quickly as he focused on the details, the tunnel seemed to smear them, like steam on glass. The rig ahead blurred back into anonymous taillights. A new sound filtered through the CB, a low, distant roar, like a crowd heard from many rooms away. Shouts, some frantic, some oddly resigned. A horn blared and blared, then cut short. Thomas's heartbeat stuttered, then surged. He fought the instinct to stomp the brake, to pull over, to do anything but move steadily forward. You didn't make it out, he said quietly into the mic, not sure if he was asking or stating. Beacon's answer was so soft he almost missed it. Not the way I meant to. No. The truck's interior seemed to get colder, despite the heater's steady breath. The orange tunnel lights blurred at the edges, as if seen through a thin veil of smoke. Why stay? Thomas asked before he could stop himself. Why this? A faint creak of a chair, or maybe of a ghost of one, came over the line. Man who messes up that big, Beacon said. Takes a while to quit looking back down the road, making sure someone else don't do the same. A pause. You're overloaded? No. Legal. Scaled out before I left. Brakes in good shape? Yeah. Then you ain't me. There was a hint of a smile in the words. That's good. Means you can listen and get out the other side. Time became meaningless in the orange-lit nowhere. Every alcove looked like the last. Every overhead fan housing hummed the same note. The far end of the tunnel remained stubbornly out of reach. Thomas's mind groped for something normal. I read about that wreck, he said, filling the silence. Said the lead truck lost it in the haze. Said the driver never got out. Bet they said a lot, Beacon replied dryly. Some of it might even be true. Another tremor of sound shivered through the CB. The echoed wail of sirens, the chopped phrases of first responders long gone from this place. Underneath it all, a steady voice, the same one currently in Thomas's cab, saying over and over, Easy, easy. Stay in your lane, don't. The recording cut off mid-word. Lights are coming, Beacon said suddenly. You'll see him in a sec. Don't stare straight into him. Just aim for the middle like always. Thomas squinted ahead. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, almost imperceptibly, the gloom ahead shifted from orange and gray to something lighter, a paler shade of darkness. Then a faint whiteness, like dawn behind a heavy curtain. His hands ached from gripping the wheel. He forced his shoulders to unclench. Once you're out, Beacon added, voice thinning. Don't look back too long. She don't like being stared at. Who's she? Thomas asked again, even though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. The night, Beacon said. The road. Doesn't matter. Just drive. The whitish glow ahead grew, brightened, separated into what he knew it to be. Daylight. Balanced tunnel exit lights, mixed with the smeared gray of fog waiting outside. The taillights ahead bobbed once more. then angled slightly, as if the truck they belonged to were heading up a narrower ramp. Then, abruptly, they weren't there at all. Thomas's rig burst out of Briar Ridge Tunnel into thick, open fog. The sudden return of rain noise on the roof made him flinch. The sky above was a uniform, low blanket of gray. The forested slopes on either side of the highway were only vague suggestions. His mirrors showed concrete portals shrinking quickly behind him, small, normal-sized. He checked the dash clock. 1:30 a.m. 3 minutes, maybe 4. His hands told him it had been longer. The smell in the cab shifted back to its usual blend of coffee and dust and truck. The faint hint of old, burned air faded, leaving only memory. The CB was quiet. He drove another mile before his legs started to shake. At the first scenic turnout past the tunnel, a little widened shoulder with a low stone wall and an obscured view, he eased the truck over and parked. The engine idled steadily. The world outside was completely still. He unclenched his fists, flexed his fingers, and realized they were trembling. He sat there for a long minute, listening to the normal sounds. The tick of cooling metal, the faint whoosh of the HVAC, the muted swish of passing cars out on the main line. The CB crackled once, just for a second. A single word threaded through the static, as soft as a thought. Good. Then nothing. At the distribution center later that morning, the receiver signed his paperwork without a hitch and asked the usual questions about timing and traffic. Thomas almost said nothing. Then, as he handed back the clipboard, he asked casually, "You ever get nervous about that Briar Ridge Tunnel?" The man behind the counter, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes, shrugged. "I don't drive it much. My old man used to. Hated that thing. He was in that big crash way back. Survived it, but he never really got over it. Talked about it like it was, I don't know, a place that remembered him. Your old man drive a gray trailer? Handle beacon?" The questions left Thomas's mouth before he could edit them. The receiver's face froze. "Yeah," he said slowly. "How'd you know that?" There was a bulletin board on the wall of the office, cluttered with schedules and memos. In one corner, half hidden under a stack of newer notices, was a faded photograph tacked up with a yellow pushpin. A man in a trucker's cap stood beside an older model tractor with a plain gray box trailer, one hand resting on the fender. He had a relaxed half smile, and the kind of eyes that looked like they'd seen a lot but still chose to be kind. Underneath, in pen gone almost purple over time, someone had written, "Mason, beacon done. 1,959, 2003. Gone ahead, but always leading." Thomas looked at the photo, at the date, at the familiar curve of the truck's hood. "Your dad gives good advice," he said quietly. "At least he did last night." The receiver's expression, caught between confusion and something like hope, lingered in Thomas's mind for a long time afterward. In the years that followed, Thomas continued to run that route. He still took Briar Ridge Tunnel, though he preferred to hit it in daylight when he could. Every once in a while, when fog wrapped the mountains just right and the clocks ticked past 1 in the morning, he felt the road under him stretch in a way that had nothing to do with asphalt. On those nights, he turned his CB volume up a notch and kept his hands gentle but firm on the wheel. More than once, as the tunnel lights blurred and his nerves tensed, a familiar voice popped through the static calm, a little amused, always steady. "Hold your lane. Easy does it. You'll be out before you know it." He never saw that gray trailer again. The red dots ahead of him were modern LEDs on newer rigs. But in his rear-view mirror, sometimes, just in the edge of the glass, he thought he caught the faintest glimmer of older chrome winking in the orange light before the glare swallowed it. He never tried to talk to Beacon again. Some conversations didn't need repeating. Instead, he focused on staying between the lines, on respecting the thin margin between safety and memory, because in the echoing half-mile of rock and concrete that didn't always obey its posted length, he had learned that not all haunted places were houses. Some were just stretches of road that refused to forget. Story number 5. There was one place on his regular circuit that Alonzo Morales refused to park. He would fuel up there, use the restroom, grab a coffee if he had to. But he would not cut the engine and close the curtains. Not at mile 117 westbound. The rest area itself looked ordinary enough in daylight. A long, low brick building with a row of vending machines under a roofed walkway. Picnic tables with bolted-down benches. A patch of scrubby trees between the car lot and the truck lot, their branches rattling in the wind. A scattering of informational signs about local history, already fading in the Sunday. If you were just passing through on vacation, you wouldn't notice anything strange. You might even call it peaceful. Truckers had another name for it. Most didn't use it when the sun was down. They just said, "Don't sleep at 117. The first time Alonzo heard that warning, he was 24 and green, sitting at a truck stop counter with a chicken fried steak he couldn't quite finish. An older woman with gray braids pulled through the back of her cap had taken the stool beside him. Her name patch read M. Henley, and her voice carried the flat, unhurried tone of someone who'd logged more hours on the interstate than most people had spent driving to the grocery store. They talked about routes, weather, the way certain dispatchers could never quite read a map. When Alonzo mentioned his overnight schedule, from the coast, across the flats, through the hills, usually stop at that old rest area before the river if I'm beat. Her fork stopped halfway to her plate. "Mile 117?" she asked. "Yeah, that one." She set the fork down. Her eyes, a clear, pale brown, met his. "You can stop there, walk your legs, use the facilities. But don't shut down for the night." "Not there." He smiled, thinking she was joking. "That place rough or something? I didn't think there was that much crime out here." "Crime comes and goes," she said. "This is different. You want to sleep? You go another 40 miles or you stop a little earlier. Just don't let yourself drift off in that lot after midnight, and if you hear anything outside, you don't open your door." A pause. "And if it sounds like someone you know, you especially don't open your door." "How would anybody know my people?" he asked, trying to keep it light. She looked past him, out at the highway visible through the truck stop windows. "They don't," she said. "That's the point." He laughed it off with a promise. Okay, I won't crash there," and filed the whole thing away as one more story drivers told to make the night shift interesting. For years, he happened to miss 117 at the wrong times anyway. Either he was full of coffee and wide awake, or he reached it in the afternoon when the sun made everything ordinary. He would take a break, stretch, face the day, and roll on. Then, one November, his schedule slipped. A late pickup at the port turned into a delay at the warehouse. What should have been a simple load of packaged foods heading inland became hours of sitting in his cab, watching forklifts dance in the mirrors. By the time he cleared the city and reached the long, dark ribbon of highway, it was already past 10. Rain had moved in, a steady cold curtain that turned the world beyond his headlights into a shimmering, dimensionless black. His eyes burned, shoulders ached. He wasn't dangerously tired, not yet, but the thought of his bunk, of the soft rattle of the sleeper with the curtains closed, grew more appealing with every mile marker. He passed the sign for a full-service truck stop at exit 103, but waved it off. That would put him behind schedule by morning. If he just made it to 117, he could grab a few hours of sleep and still hit his delivery window. The warning from years ago nipped at the back of his thoughts. Don't shut down for the night. Not there. He told himself he didn't believe in cursed mile markers. He believed in blown tires, in black ice, in people not using their turn signals. That was enough to worry about. But when the green sign for Rest Area, 2 miles slid past on the right, his hands felt a fraction heavier on the wheel. The rain thickened. Wipers clacked on high, shoving water aside. Far ahead, a smear of pale light appeared in the darkness, the glow of the rest area building and its lot lights, a small island in a wide black sea. He signaled and eased onto the deceleration lane. The car lot at the front was mostly empty. A few sedans clustered near the building entrance, their interiors dimly lit by dashboard screens. Beyond them, the truck lot stretched back, rows painted wide for long rigs, sodium lamps buzzing and popping overhead. About half the truck spots were taken. He saw reefers, flatbeds, a tanker, a couple of day cabs hitched to short trailers, shadows of sleepers with curtains drawn, silhouettes of drivers in some of the front seats, their heads tipped back. He pulled into a space near the back corner, where a stand of trees pressed close to the fence. It wasn't his ideal spot. He preferred being under the brightest light, but the angle was easy and he was too tired to thread between more trucks. Air brakes sighed. The rig settled. For a moment he just sat there, hands resting on the wheel, listening to the rain drum on the roof. Everything looked normal. Orange light pooled on wet pavement. A vending machine hummed inside the glass doors of the building 50 yards away. A blue SUV pulled in, idled for a minute, then slid back onto the highway. It was, in every objective way, just another rest area. Alonzo killed the headlights but left the engine running. He checked his mirrors again out of habit. On his left, a reefer idled steadily, white plume from its unit drifting up into the damp night. On his right, 2 empty spots, and then a dark tanker, its reflective stripes glinting faintly. Behind him, just visible in the convex mirror, the line of trees huddled together at the edge of the lot. Their bare branches webbed the sky. He thought of M. Henley's face at that truck stop counter. The way she'd set her fork down. Just a few hours, he muttered. Lock the doors. Curtains closed. Head down. He shut off the engine. The sudden quiet rang in his ears. The heater would hold for a while. The outside temperature was in the low 50s, chilly but not brutal. He could always fire up again if it got cold. He climbed into the sleeper, tugged the dark curtains shut behind him, and lay down fully dressed, just in case. The familiar sway of the truck, the muffled sound of distant engines, the faint patter of rain against the cab lulled him. His last conscious thought was that he would wake in 3 hours, hit the restroom, grab coffee from his thermos, and hit the road before dawn. Sleep came quickly. Sometime later, he woke to the feeling of someone stepping up onto his running board. The truck shifted, just enough to be felt a subtle, practiced climb that pressed weight onto the side of the cab. Not wind. Not the settling of suspension. Decades of experience snapped him halfway upright before he was fully aware he was awake. His heart thudded. His hands went to the small gap in the sleeper curtains, fingers carefully pinching them open just enough to see the dim outline of the driver's seat. The cab was dark, the only light a faint orange glow leaking in from the lot through the top of the side window. The door handle on the passenger side rattled, a slow, testing motion. Once, twice. He hadn't locked it. His own voice in his head, dry and annoyed. Rookie mistake. The handle stilled. A moment later, someone tapped on the glass. Not loud, just the gentle rap of knuckles. Lonnie, a man's voice called softly. Hey, open up, man. It's me. His friends called him Lonnie. Only people who knew him used that name. Adrenaline surged, then tangled with confusion. The voice sounded familiar, in a way he couldn't quite place at first. A warm baritone with a slight coastal drawl. For a few seconds, half asleep, he thought it might be Mitch, a buddy from the company who ran similar routes sometimes. The tone was right. The easy confidence was right. But Mitch was 2 states away on a different run. They'd texted earlier that evening. Come on, man, the voice said, a little more insistent. You parked way in the back. Didn't think you'd want to be alone out here. Every hair along Alonzo's arms stood up. Something about the cadence was wrong. The way the words landed, the way alone stretched just a hair too long. He didn't move, didn't answer. The figure outside shifted. The truck rocked minutely. He could hear the faint squeak of boots on the step, then the soft scrape of something a palm against the glass. You awake in there? The voice asked. We gotta check your trailer, man. They're saying someone popped a lock on one of the reefers. Cops want to look. He almost laughed. A small, silent thing that didn't reach his mouth. His trailer wasn't refrigerated. It was a dry van full of boxed snacks. No unit on the front. No reason for anyone to confuse it with a reefer. He stayed still. The rain had slowed. In the relative quiet, he could hear other distant sounds. A door slamming somewhere in the lot. The whine of a reefer. The whoosh of a car on the highway. Closer. Right outside his door. The breathing of whoever stood there. Slow. Patient. Lonnie, the voice coaxed. Hey. You hear me? You okay? You know it's not safe to park this far back, right? Let's go inside where it's warm. I'll buy you a coffee. The tone had shifted again. It was using concern now. The kind that might hook someone half dreaming. Someone whose brain couldn't quite line up all the details. His hand found his phone on the small shelf above the bunk. He eased it down, careful not to let it clatter. The screen's dark surface reflected his own faint outline. He thumbed it awake under the blanket. No signal, which was normal this deep in the hills. The time read 2:38 a.m. A new text notification sat at the top of the screen. From Mitch. just past 117 eastbound. You better not be sleeping there, man. Sent, 2:06 a.m. Alonzo swallowed. His throat felt tight. The door handle jiggled again, harder this time. You forget to lock this, the voice murmured, almost amused. Gotta be more careful. A faint metallic click sounded from the latch, as if something thin were probing the edge of the mechanism. The handle turned another fraction of an inch. He imagined the door swinging inward, a shape climbing into the dark cab, the weight on the bunk shifting not because of his own movements, but because something else had decided to share the space. His heart thumped so hard he was sure it must be audible. M. Henley's words floated up from years ago, vivid and solid. If you hear anything outside, you don't open your door. If it sounds like someone you know, you especially don't. Something else she had said later, in passing, when they'd ended up on the same channel during a winter storm. And if you ever hear your own voice call you from outside, you turn that key and roll. Don't wait to see what it wants. He had laughed then. It had felt like one warning too many, stacked on old superstitions. Now, in the dark of the sleeper, with a stranger using a familiar nickname at his door, he did not laugh. The knocking stopped. The quiet that followed had weight. Then, through the thin layer of glass and steel, he heard a new voice. Hey, Lonnie. You awake? It was his voice, not just similar. Exact. The same rhythm, the same little rise on the last word. He had heard himself leave that exact pattern on countless voicemails. For a split second, his mind flinched, trying to find the trick. A recording? Someone who'd somehow gotten hold of his audio from social media? But he wasn't that online. He kept his life small. His voice didn't live on many servers. Come on, man. His own voice continued, light and coaxing. You said you were going to show me that new GPS setup, remember? Open up. It's cold out here. Every instinct in him screamed, no. He slid off the bunk as quietly as he could, bare feet landing on the narrow floor. He didn't touch the curtains. Didn't risk even a finger-width gap. He felt his way forward, counting the familiar bumps and bolts until his hand found the ignition key. The moment his fingers brushed it, the outside voice changed. It lost the shape of words, collapsing into a long, low murmur that made the small hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Not quite a growl. Not quite a sigh. The truck rocked slightly, as if someone outside had leaned against it, pressing their weight into the cab. Alonzo twisted the key. The engine coughed, caught, rumbled to life. The dash lights flared, then settled. Headlights stayed off. He didn't touch them. He left the cabin dark, relying on his memory of the lot. Foot on the brake, hand on the shifter, he eased the rig into gear. Outside, something slapped softly against the door, an open palm, maybe, or the flat side of a hand. You're leaving? His own voice asked, faintly distorted now, leaking around the edges of whatever it had been using for shape. You only just got here. He stared straight ahead. He did not answer. The tractor pulled forward, slow, heavy. The suspension creaked as weight shifted. As he turned the wheel to angle out of the spot, he risked a glance at the small lower mirror on the driver's side, the one that showed the running board and the immediate area near the door. In the instant his eyes flicked to it, he saw something. A hand gripping the side mirror's arm. Pale in the sodium light. Fingers long. Nails dark from wet or dirt. Not attached to anything he could clearly discern, just the hand. And beyond it, a shape like darker water in the rain. Then the truck's movement changed the angle. The image slid out of the mirror's range. He did not look again. He navigated between the rows of sleeping trucks by feel and habit, engine noise oddly muffled under the low clouds. At the far end of the lot, he turned toward the exit. Only then did he flick his headlights on. For a fraction of a second, the beam caught the back of the rest area. The trees behind the truck lot pressed close, their branches shivering. In the gap between two parked rigs, he thought he saw a person standing, facing his way. Too far to make out features. No reflective vest, no flashlight. Just a tall, still outline. By the time he blinked, the angle had changed, and the figure was lost in the bright splash of light and shadow. He told himself it was just a driver stretching his legs. The ramp back to the interstate rose ahead, wet but clear. He took it a little faster than usual, merging onto the empty highway, with a sense of stepping across a line. Only when the rest area lights had dwindled to a distant glow in his mirrors did he let his shoulders slump. The CB crackled, startling him. Channel 19. Quiet all night. Suddenly carried a familiar voice. "You parked there, didn't you?" Monsieur Henley said. No greeting, no preamble. "You got back out, though. That's what matters." He grabbed the mic, fingers trembling just enough to shake the plastic. "How did you—" "Where are you?" "Eastbound," she replied. "Just passed you a minute ago. Saw your tail in the mirror leaving that lot. Didn't think you'd be dumb enough to sleep there." "I wasn't gonna," he said, surprised at how shaky he sounded. "Then I was late and tired, and I was just gonna grab a few hours." "Yeah," she said quietly. "That's how it starts." He hesitated. "What is it?" The line hissed for a moment. He pictured her somewhere out ahead, hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the same wet blacktop. "You ever notice how 117's always got space?" she asked. "Even when the other lots are jammed, that one's got spots open in the back row. Folks pull in thinking they got lucky." He thought of the 2 empty spots beside him when he parked. The way it had felt both convenient and wrong. "They say it started with a bad heater," she went on. "Driver left his rig running on a cold night years ago. Exhaust leak filled the cab. Never woke up. After that, couple more incidents. People getting out of their trucks in the middle of the night, no shoes, no coat. They find them in the tree line in the morning, or they don't find them at all. Cops say it's exposure, maybe robbery, maybe folks not thinking straight cause of meds or drink. But drivers know better." Has swallowed. His mouth felt dry. "Know better how?" "They know the way it comes to the door," she said. "First like someone you might help. Then like someone you might trust. Then like yourself. I was parked there once. Long time ago. Thought those stories were just talk. Heard my husband calling me from outside. Only thing was, he'd been gone 10 years. Came right up to the glass and knocked. Voice as clear as the day he left on his last run. I almost opened that door, Lonnie. Had my hand on the latch before something twisted in my gut. I locked it instead. Sat there till dawn while it walked around my truck for hours, using every voice it thought I wanted to hear. Never did call me by my full name right, though. That's how I knew." He thought of the way the voice at his door had stretched certain words, how it had known his nickname but not his cargo, how it had used his own voice at the end, and how wrong that had felt. "Why doesn't anybody do anything about that place?" he asked, hearing the tightness in his own words. "Shut it down, tear it up, something. Tried closing it once," she said. "State had it taped off for repairs for a few months. Folks parked on the shoulder instead. Same thing started happening. Just closer to the highway. They opened it back up. Figured it was safer to keep the lot lit, and hope people listened when someone told them to keep the doors locked." A pause. He could hear the hum of her engine over the line, the faint rattle of something on her dash. "Some places just get thin," she added. "All the loneliness, all the tired minds passing through, all that quiet. Something out there hears it and comes looking for a way in." They rode the same frequency in silence for a while, both trucks eating up dark miles in opposite directions. Eventually, her voice came again, softer. "You did right. Leaving when you did. Don't give it a second chance." "I won't," he said, and he meant it. He drove until dawn tinted the horizon a dull gray, then pulled into a crowded truck stop with bright lights and the constant clang of dishes and hiss of fryers. He slept there, engine off, deadbolt thrown, the murmur of other human voices filtering through the thin walls of the cab. In the years that followed, he still passed mile 117 westbound and eastbound. In daylight, it looked almost benign. Kids ran from minivans to the bathrooms. Couples walked their dogs on the small strip of grass. Tourist brochures fluttered under glass. At night, from the highway, the rest area glowed in its little bowl, a cluster of yellow lights in the darkness. Sometimes he would see plenty of trucks parked close to the building, their outlines solid and comforting. There were always a few spots open in the back row. Once, threading past in the small hours, he glanced over and saw a figure moving slowly along that back line, too far away to see clearly. Not wearing reflective gear, no flashlight bobbing, just a dark outline sliding between the hulks of sleeping rigs. He looked back at the road and kept going. He told newer drivers to avoid 117 when they asked for tips. Most of them smiled like he once had. Made a joke about ghosts and old wives' tales. He didn't argue. People believed what they could handle. Every now and then, though, when he met a tired-eyed driver at a coffee counter who couldn't quite explain why they had suddenly become very particular about where they parked, he would see a flash of shared understanding. They knew. They'd heard the step on the running board, the knock on the glass, the voice just almost, but not quite, right. And like him, they now planned their nights around one simple rule. You can stop at 117. You can stretch. You can walk under the lights and listen to the hiss of passing traffic. But you don't sleep there. You don't answer the door. And if anything out in the rain ever calls your name in a voice that sounds exactly like your own, you turn the key, put the truck in gear, and let that little island of light sink into the rearview mirror without looking back too long. Because some stories on the road weren't just stories. They were map notes without ink. Warnings carried in quiet voices over late-night coffee and crackling radios, passed from driver to driver, so that miles down the line, someone sitting alone in a dark sleeper might remember in time to keep the lock turned and the curtain closed.